After learning about functions, we want to look at a specific type of function that gives a lot of people trouble, and it's piecewise functions. We're going to see that these show up every April or so, and how we can actually use these to our advantage. So I'm going to go through a scenario to start, a real world example, and let's look at tax season. So artist had a taxable income of $34,000 in 2016 and will file as a single individual. Determine the amount of taxes that artist is going to have to pay, and if you have a table listing the marginal tax rates. And this marginal tax rate table is right off of irs.gov, so this is a real deal situation. So let's take a look as to what's actually happening with this table. So with the table, basically what we have is a function in terms of our taxable income. So that's what we're going to try and create, is a function, f of x, where x represents our taxable income and f of x will represent our total amount of taxes being paid. So our first scenario, if we look at the first line of the table, notice between 0 and then all the way up to $9,275, you're going to owe 10% of your taxable income will be taxed. So if we do that, we basically just take 10% of x, since x is our taxable income, and that puts our range of values, as I said before, on a taxable income from 0 to $9,275. Moving forward to the next one, notice between $9,275 and then all the way up to $37,650, we actually have total tax being $927.50. But then we add on 15% of the amount over $9,275. So basically that 15% over that $9,275 will take 0.15 times the quantity x minus $9,275. So plugging in for that formula, you get 927.5 plus 15 hundredths times x minus 9,275, that last quantity there. In this range, it's based upon our taxable income range. Moving forward, we can do the next one. Just notice we start with that $5,183.75, and it's 25% on the taxable income over $37,650. And the range here for values is $37,650 to $91,150. We can complete the rest of the chart same manner, and what we have here is the idea of a piecewise function, breaking a function into its parts dependent upon the domain. In this case, the domain is based upon the taxable income amounts. So, as I mentioned, a piecewise function is a function that's defined by basically different formulas or different functions for different parts of the domain. So, let's take a look so we can maybe go back and tackle that tax problem in a minute. So, we're going to consider the function f of x equals x squared if x is less than or equal to negative 3. It's going to be negative 2x plus 3 if negative 3 is less than x, and that's less than 2. And it's going to equal negative 1 if x is greater than or equal to 2. And we want to evaluate f of negative 6, f of 0, f of 7, f of negative 3, and f of 2. So moving forward, if we take a closer look, we'll begin with f of negative 6 and we'll kind of move on down the line. So f of negative 6, what are we dealing with here? Well, what we have to look at is where does the negative 6 fall into our three different scenarios. So notice our conditions are the statements that appear after the if part of the function. So you have the three scenarios: x less than or equal to negative 3, negative 3 less than x, less than 2, and x is greater than or equal to 2. So with f of negative 6, notice that satisfies the conditions in the first statement. So negative 6 is less than or equal to negative 3. So that means, notice how negative 6 has replaced the x value. Negative 6 should replace the x value in our equation given there. So this becomes negative 6, the quantity squared, and then just plugging and chugging, we get 36, and that's our final answer. Moving forward from there, our next scenario, we're looking at f of 0. So we need to find where that 0 fits into our three conditions. Well, notice 0 is not less than or equal to negative 3, but 0 does fall between negative 3 and 2. So our winner chicken dinner will be our second equation, and we're going to plug in 0 in for the x value in the equation. So notice we get negative 2 times 0 plus 3, because the 0 replaced that x value right there. And if you plug that in, we end up with a final answer of 3. Moving forward from there, now we want to look at f of 7. Which of the 3 scenarios does that fit into? Well, notice 7 is not less than or equal to negative 3. Second scenario, 7 does not fall between negative 3 and 2. However, 7 is greater than or equal to 2. So now we need to plug it into the equation that satisfies our third condition. And notice the equation here doesn't have any x values, so we aren't plugging 7 into anything. So actually, this one's a little bit easier than most. All we have is f of 7 equals, well, the value is negative 1. And it'll always be negative 1 for any value greater than or equal to 2. So the last couple, these are kind of the endpoints of intervals, so we'll take a look at these as well. F of negative 3, what are we looking at? Well, f of negative 3, so we have x value of negative 3. Notice that does satisfy the first condition, because negative 3 is less than or equal to negative 3. So when we plug that into the equation x squared, we'll get negative 3, the quantity squared, which is just equal to 9. So moving forward from here in our last piece, f of 2, which one of the 3 conditions satisfy 2 being our x value? Well, it'll be the third equation. So because 2 is greater than or equal to 2, so that means that since there's no x value, our answer for this one is just negative 1. Now we have all those pieces in place. Let's see if we can go back to our tax question. So just a reminder, artist had a taxable income of $34,000 in 2016, file as a single individual, and we want to determine the amount of taxes artist pays. Okay, and the marginal taxes that we're looking at was basically given by this piecewise tax function that we talked about early on. So moving forward, what are we looking for? Well, artist has a taxable income of $34,000. Remember, x represents taxable income. So if that's the case, we're going to find the condition that satisfies $34,000. So f of $34,000, let's look. Well, $34,000 is not between 0 and $9,275, but if you look on that second condition, $34,000 is actually between $9,275 and $37,650. So that's the equation we're going to use. So now moving forward from there, we want to just plug in the 34,000 in for the x value. So this gives us 927 and 5/10 plus 1,500 times the quantity 34,000 minus 9,275. Simplifying that inside the parentheses there, we get 927.5 plus 0.15 times 24,725, which gives us a total tax amount of 4,636 and 2,500. Or remember, this is all money. The amount of taxes that artist has to pay is $4,636.25. So this is showing you how piecewise functions work, and hopefully you can put them to good use here in this upcoming section.